Otherwise, it will be an escapist of reality, and you are going to subject our people to more suffering. Because now it's about survival for the fittest. Those with the deeper pockets are surviving better. Those with nothing, they are almost getting extinct from the Kenyan economics. You said we are becoming escapees from reality. And Mheshimiwa Abdul Kore, at this point I introduce you. And as the Azimio side has really had a couple of minutes of proper beating the Kenya Kwanza side, especially on matters debt. And as we wait for Mheshimiwa Geoffrey Ruku to make this conversation balanced, I'll give you time to, first of all, karibu sana to AM Live.
Thank you very much.
Your colleagues are commenting on some of the stories that are making headlines today, and we have spoken about the debt and the new reality that what we are using to pay our debts is now surpassing our recurrent and development expenditure. This at a time when Kenya Kwanza, which you serve in, is in government. In fact, the Daily Nation says that in the first 1 year of President William Ruto, the debt burden has increased by 21%. That as compared to 10 years of President Kenyatta, 386%, and 10 years of President Kibaki at 182%. What is your quick thoughts?
My quick thoughts are, well, these are very extraordinary times. And apologies for arriving late in the first place, but because of some traffic, I stay a bit far. I found my colleague talking about the debt issue. And one thing I liked about his contribution is the fact that we need to look at this as a country. We are in this together. And if we sink deeper, we'll all sink together. And if we come out of it, we'll all come out of it together. Well, the 21% debt increase in 12 months may look like something like very huge. But I believe with a number of measures the government has already put in place, some of it a bit painful to begin with. But once we realize the fruits of some of those measures at the end of the first 5 years term, or maybe at the end of the 10 years term, I think that's when we can see a proper comparison between the President Kibaki, President Kenyatta, and President Ruto as to who actually had the debt, increase highest during their term. Now it's only 12 months. We know we inherited a country, or rather this government came into power at a very extraordinary time when the country was facing a lot of challenges, not just economically. Even, we just came out of drought. And when we went into election, for example, in my constituency, only 60% turned up to vote because most of the other 40% were out looking for pasture in neighboring countries. We came out of a very difficult contextual circumstances as a country, and then the issues going on around the globe has also not helped matters. So we are in very extraordinary times, and we know we are in a lot of challenges. Kenyans, the Kenyan shilling is becoming less valuable as compared to the dollar, and the cost of living is becoming higher. And the government is concentrating on a number of areas to make sure some of these issues are arrested. And it's only with the fullness of time that we'll be able to gauge whether those measures that the government has put in place has actually borne fruit or not. But yes. But as you say about only in the fullness of time is when we'll be able to gauge. If you were to gauge Kenya Kwanza on its own promises and on its own targets, then it would be fair to say that it has been a fail, because Kenya Kwanza set its own target in 3 months' time, in 100 days' time, in 1 year's time. Most of the things said against these targets or these deadlines have not been met. So when you say in the fullness of time, what exactly do you mean? When do we expect to start reaping? I think you can start gauging Kenya Kwanza's performance maybe at the end of 5 years, because there is an election manifesto Kenya Kwanza committed itself to, and I think by and large Kenya Kwanza is trying its best to make sure it fulfills that election manifesto. The other bit is about election rhetoric during campaigns. What politicians say during campaigns off the cuff and to the people. Sometimes when you try and gauge that and mistake it for the election manifesto that a coalition has committed itself to, it might be a little bit confusing. So in the fullness of time, let's look at 5 years, and I know President Ruto will be re-elected. Then let's see at the end of 10 years.
All right. Thank you very much. And that is Abdul Kore, Member of Parliament, Mandera South.
You did not tell him. You know, he's admitting something, that they lied to Kenyans. Because when you say, what politicians say...
Election rhetoric.
Yeah, that is wrong, because...
Off cuff.
Yeah. yeah. Judges on our election manifesto, not on the electoral rhetorics.
We are coming to the good members of Parliament in a couple of minutes, but we are still looking at some of the top stories making the first page of the Daily Nation. Increased fee school cash for each learner. The Kenya National Union of Teachers demands, and NAT wants, a significant increase in funds that the government allocates for each learner in primary and junior secondary school, saying the current allocation are too low for schools to meet their programs. NAT SG Collins OU contended the current allocations are causing school heads financial distress. Then another story still on the front page of the Daily Nation. This should be Nziu, not Nzui. River Nziu crossing still incomplete years after tragedy claimed 32 lives. This is a story that has been done by Margaret Kimathi and our team there, and they speak about long before the raging waters of River Nziu claimed the lives of 32 people heading to a wedding party in December 4th, 2021. The danger always lurked. Residents had always feared for the worst, but again, they had hoped that a proper bridge would be constructed. And again, still on the front page of the Daily Nation, there is a story happening on the sidelines of COP in Dubai, and higher fuel prices on the cards as President Ruto pushes for new carbon tax. To give you a brief on that story, the cost of fossil fuel and travel could rise should an ambitious new carbon tax proposal fronted by President William Ruto at the COP28 summit in Dubai, UAE, sails through. The proposal seeks to compel fossil fuel companies and industries that emit greenhouse gases to pay for the damage that their operations cause to the planet. Be sure to grab a copy of the Daily Nation if you want that and very many other stories that have been written by our team of stellar reporters here and writers at the Nation Media Group. But I want us to move to the Standard members, and this is because there is a very interesting headline on the Standard, and it says, experts say Kibaki would be shocked at Ruto-nomics. The kicker on the story, economists say President Ruto claims of copying former President Mwai Kibaki's economic playbook seem not to be working, as his policies and interventions point in the opposite direction, leaving Kenyans desperate and hurting. Pages 4 and 5. Then there is that percentage. They've quoted 10.5% interest. The CBK rate is at 10.5%, up from 7.2% in July 2022. Since then, it has been on a steady climb. I'll start with you. Let me start with Mwenje. President William Ruto has time and again, including his deputy, said we are going to run this government and take it to where President Kibaki left it, and perhaps even better. Now, experts, according to the Standard, and the stories on page 4 and 5, are saying that President Kibaki would be shocked at Ruto-nomics.
Well, first of all, let's make it clear that President Kibaki was a real economist. And unfortunately, President Ruto just doesn't get how Kibaki ran the government. If you start with just what is on the headline, the 10.5%, which is the CBK rate, all you need to do is go back and see what Kibaki's rate was. I think it was always below 3%. That was the rate that Kibaki insisted. And why? Kibaki refused to even borrow locally. He wanted the local banks to lend to the private sector within the economy so that the private sector can build itself. So he let the private sector, even if it's like this issue of housing, if Kibaki were here today, he would have left that to the private sector. You handle this issue. You raise the money, build, and do all those things. That is why it is so, that's why you're saying the comparison that has been put here between Kibaki and President Ruto. More importantly, once you've addressed the issues of interest rates And that means that the banks today, cooperative bank, equity bank, prefer lending to the government because they consider that to be less risky as compared to lending it to the private sector. And of course, the returns that they get, you know, if you are to assume Equity Bank were to lend out $1 billion to the public, that means they have to open branches all over the country. They have to get people who will go and sell those loans, you know, and get people to take those loans. So you create a whole economy just by lending this $1 billion to the private sector. If you're lending this $1 billion to the government, then you only need one person. The MD himself will just approve and say, we're lending this to the bank. There's a team of lawyers who just draft some papers there, and that's it. Done. Remember, if you can remember properly, in 2003, 2004, and even as late as 2011, 2013, when Kibaki was coming to clear, if you would have walked right down here at KCB, where KCB is, there were tents that had been put up there with banks trying to get loans. That was the time when banks were saying, as long as you have a pay or you have a salary, you can borrow even up to 1 million Kenya shillings so that you can do whatever you want to do with it. Because the banks just had money and needed to just offload it off to people. So, to me, the way the government has done is that it's completely moved away from the Kibaki era economic model of low interest rates. Go and get, let the private sector borrow locally so that we're not in competition. I, as an individual, if I want to borrow from a cooperative bank, I cannot compete with the government. The government is way bigger and stronger. So you don't have money available within our economy. Two, you've raised our taxes to the level that investors are now staying away. Businesses are now collapsing. During Kibaki's time, it was about, it's not about increasing taxes. It was about pulling more people to come into the tax base. Right now, as you can see, the taxes that every individual was paying as of last year, right now, even yourself, go look at your payslip. Right now, you'll see you have more deductions, and more are still coming. We have more that are still going to come.
However, Muhesh,
we have to change. We have to change that, because if you tax a country the way it's happening right now, then we won't have money to go around within the private sector. And believe you me, the private sector is where we are going to build this country.
However, Muhesh, I mean, there are only two ways that a country can raise its revenue. One, taxation. Two, borrowing. So if we keep complaining whenever taxation is happening, from my take would be, then let's still pay for the taxes, but follow and ensure there is accountability in the taxes that are being collected. Because President William Ruto says, we have borrowed enough, we need to, you know, get our own revenue. In fact, you can see efforts from the government to try and expand the people who are paying taxes. They have, KRA has people who are going out there to get into businesses and enroll people to paying taxes. Then is it not too early to fault President Ruto on these taxation matters, especially given the tough situation that the country is operating in right now?
To me, I completely disagree. If we're in a tougher situation, what any country should be doing is lowering those taxes. When you increase them already, you have somebody who's trained.
But you lower the taxes, you lose the revenue.
No. There's this illusion that if you continue, in fact, let me break it down to you. At 0% taxes, then the country is collecting nothing. If you tax people at 100%, you'll also collect nothing, because nobody will do business. We have to be somewhere there in between. In economics, there's a curve that exists, that you get to a point where if you tax people, and that's what's happening right now, that you've taxed people to the point that you're no longer collecting more. You'll stagnate, because the more you increase taxes, a few people are able to pay those taxes, but some of the other people decide to even walk away from business. So you'll find you're at the same place. You just look at even with these increases that happened, you can be sure right now KRA is not even hitting the targets that they thought they were going to hit, because people are pulling out.
That is true.
So we have to, we cannot increase our taxes anymore. And don't forget that the cost of living, the commodities, when you're buying petrol, you're buying cooking oil and all these things, the prices are still going up. So whichever way you look at it, we are now at the point where the curve will start going down. That even if we increase the taxes, KRA will never meet its target.
Will never meet its target. That is true, because we have actually reported it here at the Nation of KRA not meeting its target. Payee, for instance, and including fuel. People have left their vehicles at home. That
actually,
we have spoken about.
Just before Basil comes in, I'll tell you, I'm an employer. I've got a law firm. I've got a business somewhere. When some of these taxes came in, we as employers had to make some tough decisions, because at some point you think we might have to lay off a few people so that whatever money they have, we will distribute to cover the housing levy and all these things. Because don't forget, these taxes affect both the employer and the employee.
Sure. Basil.
You know, I agree with my brother Mwenje here. The curve he was mentioning is called Laver's curve. Basically, when you increase taxation, you actually reduce disposable income for your people. And even some people hold on their money. And when you increase more taxes, particularly what happened when we passed the Finance Act, of course, when Kenya Kwanza passed the Finance Act, ideally banks ended to raise interest to be able to remain afloat, to generate profits. So these are some of the ripple effects of the Finance Act. So what Kibaki did when he inherited the government, he did not increase taxes. When you cut taxes, ideally you increase the tax base and you create disposable income for your people. Kibaki was not the first person to do this. We had a president in the United States called Ronald Reagan. He did the same. He used the Laver's curve of taxation model, where you cut taxes, you allow your people to be able to have disposable income, and you create incentives for your people. Basically, once you create incentives, people spend more. And that is where you're able to generate more revenue for your country. But when you increase more taxes, you scare investors. Those with little, you create a panic mood in the economics. And as a result, even your tax collecting authority cannot generate the revenue it is targeted to collect. And that is where we are today. So what President Ruto should have done is he should have done some literature review to look at other countries who are in the situation we are in, what they did. And I've given an example like United States. In 1961, Ronald Reagan used the Laver's curve, where he cut taxes for his citizens. And as a result, people were able to spend more, and he was able to generate more for its people. Kibaki did the same. Now, if you continue adding tax, I've just read you even bringing the carbon emission tax, which is even going to worsen the situation. You cannot say you are going to tame the carbon emission by introducing the carbon tax. Remember, even the government itself is not doing anything to reduce carbon emission. The gasless cars, all ministers, all state agencies are using gasless. So if you purport to bring a carbon emission tax, targeting manufacturers and the people who are supposed to generate employment and wealth for your people, then it means they're even going to run to Tanzania immediately. And this is the kind of strategies which anyone is asking himself or herself, who are the advisors of President Ruto, because they seem to be hypothetical economists. They don't seem to resonate with the reality. Because if they were resonating with the reality, they would advise the head of state in the right way. But what is going on is going to be worse unless they rethink their decision.
Correct.
Otherwise, we are losing. Do you know Tanzania is surpassing Kenya? Look at the way our currency is performing against Tanzania. By last year, Kenya shillings were exchanging at 22 shillings to Tanzanian shillings. Now it has dropped to 15 shillings. What does that mean to not ordinary Kenyans and Kenyans who are trending in Tanzania? So very soon we'll be talking of 10 shillings, and below that we are talking of 0 to 10. And eventually our economics will be now talking of the economic powers to be Tanzania as opposed to Kenya, which we have enjoyed since 1961.
When we come back, I'm told by John we have to take a break, but when we come back we'll start with you, Abdul Korea, and I think I'll give you double the time so that because Ruku is not getting here. We hope he'll be here by the time we are coming from the break, but we take a break here on AM Live. We are having that conversation on the state of the nation right now, looking at the headlines, but later on, in a couple of minutes, we shall be getting into our main topic, which is beating the referendums. These are drums of a plebiscite that will be coming if we are to implement what is in NADCO. But you are watching AM Live here on NTV. My name is Ibrahim Karanja. Don't go too far.
Botswana stands tall as a shining example of democratic values and good governance in Africa.
Hivyo vipeni vyako kidogo ndo umeamua uviharibu kwa mambo yasiyokuwa na maana. Oh please. Sina muda saizi. I'm busy. Unaweza enda?
Mama. Kama ungekuwa umelea Tony kama mtoto wako wa kuzaa, haungekuwa unaingilia mambo yake ya muhimu kama haki ya kumchagulia bibi.
Hautamuongelesha mama hivyo.
Ningekushauri hivi. Badala ya kujali uamuzi wangu, shughulikia ndoa yako.
Unajua unachosema wewe?
Watch out for Safaricom Santa coming to a town near you with Christmas surprises. Sambaza furaha this Christmas na Safaricom.
Praise Atmosphere 2023 on the 9th of December at Sitam Karen, Nairobi from 2 p.m. onward, featuring Evelyn Wanjiru, Prosper Ochimana from Nigeria, Rehema Simfukwe from Tanzania, Edith Wairimo, Celestine Donkor from Ghana, Wilberforce Musyoka, Solomon Mukubwa, Kestin Bogo, and Sharon Ishavuka from Kenya. Regular tickets are available for just 1,000 shillings, 2,000 shillings at the gate. Visit www.praiseatmosphere.com/events or use paybill number 800-8575, account Praise.
As are we crossing over?
Dynasties are special. Constant success and domination that garners deserved praise and plaudits. On the other hand, there is nothing quite like the underdog that threatens that dynasty, if only for a short time. Which is exactly where Girona fits in this La Liga season, looking to unseat the big clubs with the ultimate underdog performance.
And people come in and they're like, oh, it works. I can have ice cream and I'm not in any discomfort. I recommend Sensodyne because it works. It's brilliant.
One-seater bus ferrying a Catholic church choir from Mwingi to Nu plunged into this river, killing 32 people.
But we're in agreement, we don't have 2 years to wait. We're not going to lose any more lives in here.
It will be a memorial, Enzio Memorial Bridge.
Miaka miwili baadaye, daraja lililoahidiwa na serikali bado halijakamilika.
It is a joke on the side of the government.
Tuko na shida kwa hii mto Enzio. Kwenda sokoni ni shida.
Kwani hii bridge haina wasimamizi ambao wanaweza wakatilia mkazo.
Kama watu wamekufa zaidi ya 30, unangoja wengine wangapi wakufa?
The Sport Essence is a light serum, quickly absorbed to clear dark marks. Rich moisturizing cream is a gel cream type that deeply hydrates and prevents dark marks. I highly recommend Melano CC for healthy and happy skin. Ruto.
All right, you're watching AM Live here on NTV, and we continue with the discussion that we are having. For the next 1 or so minutes, we still look at the papers, and then we get into our topic. And it is important to give this opportunity to the Honorable Abdul Kore, because he is so far the only Kenya Kwanza Member of Parliament who is here. The Honorable Geoffrey Roko confirms that he is on the way, so he will find us amid the conversation. But Kore, 2 years ago, 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 2 years a there is a comparison here between what President Kibaki did for the economy and what President Ruto has done. And according to the Standard, it has quoted experts who are saying that Kibaki will actually be shocked if he learnt of Ruto-nomics. What is your take?
I think my take is nobody will be shocked. Ruto-nomics will work. And I can tell you, Kibaki was a very good president. He really managed to turn the economy around. And that's why even our president looks at him as a role model, you know, to help him, to copy him, to see whether he can model his economics theories along what Kibaki did. But many things have conspired to make Ruto and Kibaki look different. Times are different. Kibaki approached his economics and how he would put down the cost of living differently. For example, he worked more on with other economic actors in the field. He worked with the banks so that the banks could actually engage the private sector in terms of lending and borrowing and what have you. I think Ruto has tried to copy the Kibaki style, and I'm sure he is going to perfect the Kibaki-nomics. The Ruto-nomics will be better than Kibaki-nomics at the end of the day. But along the way, because I've said times are not the same, so many things have conspired. The context in the world today is not the same as the context in the world when Kibaki took over. Kibaki actually encouraged Kenyans to pay taxes. It's not true that Kibaki did not, in fact he had that famous slogan, kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea. And that is the script His Excellency Ruto is actually copying from Kibaki. You know, he believes if Kenyans paid taxes, you know, we will be self-sufficient. We'll depend on ourselves rather than depend on the borrowings. And don't forget, I wish Ruto was given a clean slate, you know, zero debt, and told, run your government, let's see how you perform. You see, he's inherited a huge debt.
But all the other presidents equally.
I know, but he's inherited one of the large, actually it's the biggest debt in the history of this country as a president. And he's struggling to make sure, because if Kenya defaults, you know what happens. Implication internationally is a big issue. So he's struggling to pay those debts, at the same time trying to make sure, because of the circumstances that are prevailing, make sure the country comes out of this situation we're in. You know, the economic downturn, the high cost of living, you know, the devaluation of the shilling against the dollar. There are so many multiple fronts that President Ruto is trying to fight. And some of the things that he's putting in place, even when he addressed the nation the other day in the State of the Nation address, his last paragraph, if you can remember, he didn't say we are there. He said, I have tried to put in place the necessary mechanisms to put this country on the right path. And I think from now going forward, we will start realizing some of the fruits from that. So I think there are certain things, perhaps as a country, as a government, we should have done better, and it is still not too late. You know, engaging more of other players in the economic sector rather than the government. The picture out there now looks like, it seems like it's the government running this economy on its own, without engaging other actors.
Sure.
You know, so maybe we will do better in terms of trying to explain more to Kenyans how we are engaging other actors in the economy and what have you. And I think perhaps we'll go to that debate later on. Even the National Dialogue Committee proposed a number of issues that needs to be done by the government in order to cut the expenditure in government. My colleague of the CAF, we were just discussing about the fact that you know, the ministers moving around maybe in 4, 5, 6, 7 cars, you know, fuel guzzlers, and you know, that show of extravagance when we have this kind of economic situation is something that we should do better as a government. And I think we'll be there in fullness of time, as I always say. So I think we need to engage the private sector more. We need to engage other actors in the field more. And I think the president's take, especially on trying to make sure we produce food, because if you look at the cost of living, for example, in this country, 70% of the cost of living is basically suffered by Kenyans, his own food. So if we manage to produce more food and we bring down the cost of food, perhaps we will be dealing with also some of the problems. This is what I mean when I say, in the fullness of time, some of these measures the government has put in place.
I think I saw proposals. Was it in Parliament to reduce some of these taxes? As I think excise duty on essential commodities, food items and such. It was actually on the Daily Nation on Saturday, was it?
Yeah, of course, definitely. The government, you know, will definitely do a number of reviews on the taxes, on other issues, because other than trying to realize the manifesto that we made to the Kenyans, the government also realizes these are hard times and Kenyans are talking to their government. And definitely the government is also trying to see what areas it can do in order to reduce the cost of living and to ease the suffering for the Kenyans.
All right. And at that point, I think with the direction of...
there's something I want to tell you, man. You know, he said that Kibaki motto was kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea. There is one thing on that motto. Yes, Kenyans are encouraged to pay taxes. But the biggest question Kenyans ask themselves, we pay taxes, but services are not equitably distributed. Yes. We saw the other day, less than a month ago, the Minister for Roads, he gazetted roads to be tarmacked. You can imagine, out of that money, if you look at some counties, to get a good example like Makueni, Machakos and Kitui, and even Madera, we received like nothing in that total gazettement of roads to be tarmacked. Then you ask yourself, how will you convince people in Ukambani, Mandera and other areas to pay taxes when the money they are collecting is not equitably distributed in resources? So paying taxes is one thing, but service delivery, and that is where our government is failing. We have to tell them the truth, because even Article 10 of the Constitution talks of equity in governance and service delivery. But the people, the custodians, to implement government programs, instead of applying the Article 10 of the Constitution of equity in delivery of services, they are doing it based on where they come from. If you come from this particular region, you take all services there. And yet, all Kenyans pay taxes.
And because you're members of parliament and you've brought up that issue, this goes to the three of you. There was a very interesting claim that came from the CS, that much as there are these complaints, each constituency each year gets about 62 million for roads. Is it true?
That's a joke.
That's a joke.
That's a joke. You see, yeah, that's a joke.
Because that came from the CS.
You see, you can explain.
You know, Kera gives us a bit for maintenance within the constituencies, but that cannot be sufficient to develop the constituencies. One, you have to look at how big these constituencies are. What is 60 million going to do in one constituency, to be honest? Secondly, there's a lot more funds that the CS himself has that are allocated, which is what now he was trying to talk about. For Nairobi, for instance, we generate 60% of the GDP of this country. We were given 1.3 kilometers, 80 million from that allocation. Yet some counties here were receiving about 1.52 billion to develop their roads. What are we going to do with 1.3 kilometers? In fact, with our 17 constituencies, you leave us fighting amongst ourselves. In fact, we just said, whoever he'll decide to give, let him give, because it's very little.
Do you know, to add on what my brother is saying, and I'm now looking at my constituency, do you know since independence, I've never got more than 2 kilometers of tarmac road. Since independence. Are those people pay taxes? How will you tell Yatta people to continue paying taxes, yet when it comes to road distribution, we're talking of tarmac road, they get nothing? This maintenance money for roads, like now with these rains, all the roads have gone back to zero. So we are doing repetitive exercise to maintain roads.
Correct.
And it is also, it explains why.
We need to take this conversation forward.
Yeah. So the government needs to rethink, because you see, if you talk of maintenance money alone, these are repetitive work every time and then. Why don't you refocus? You better do 2 kilometers every single year in all the 290 constituencies of tarmac road. And you'll be able, if that was the trend from the last 6 years today, we'll be talking of uniformity in infrastructure in the country. But there's a huge disparity now.
I think I concur with my colleagues on this. The question of, unfair distribution of resources and the question of corruption is a problem in this country. And I think when it comes to the 62 million
per constituency,
even those constituencies which have ended up getting extra billions receive the same amount.
The same 62.
The same 62 million. So what is the logic of, you know, saying some are receiving 62 million, that's why they missed out on that road levy, road money, and yet those other ones which are receiving 62 million, the same 62 million, are now receiving 1.2 billion, 1.5 billion for extra roads in their constituencies. So that kind of unfairness is something, even if I'm in government, we will hold the executive to account on these issues, because Kenyans are not compartmentalized on those issues, like, you know, you come from this region or you come from that region, you are a lesser Kenyan than the other Kenyan, you know, like now, the whole of Northeastern is not accessible because of the El Nino rains.
Sure.
The main artery to Northeastern, Garissa, is cut off from the rest of Northeastern. So we are talking of about 800,000 Kenyans, you know, in the next few weeks will not be able to receive any goods and services by road. You know, Mandera, Wajir, Garissa. And billions of roads that would have been used to open those crossings which have been swept away by floods have been taken to other regions which have not even had any problems with floods.
Sure.
And you are telling us you receive 62 million and you should keep quiet.
Food for thought for Transport CS Kipchumba Murkomen. This is what members
next
of Parliament...
time you need to bring him here. We sit with him and he explains to Kenyans.
Yes, because this is exactly what members of Parliament feel about your claim of the monies that have been distributed across the country. But gentlemen, allow us to get to the topic of conversation today. And the topic of conversation or